Hello, I'm Darren Magee, and today's topic is continuing on from the previous video, following many questions I've had around cyberbullying and internet trolling. In the previous video, I looked at the different kinds of troll and looked at some of their motivations that might explain their behavior. In this video, I'm going to look at the personality type. I'm also going to look at different areas of research and then maybe bring them together to see how they fit. But just to remind you, this video is for information purposes only. I would like to say as well, before we go any further, not everybody who posts something controversial online or maybe has a disagreement with someone is an internet troll. Many people disagree, many people debate, and they can generally respect each other, and even if they don't come to a consensus, still treat each other with civility. Sometimes there can even be a miscommunication which can lead to some kind of contention. That's still not the same as internet trolling. When you think of the term troll, remember, this comes from a mythical creature who's generally quite horrible. They're very quarrelsome and disagreeable and not very friendly at all. And what we see with internet trolls is someone who is deliberately trying to evoke some kind of emotional reaction at the expense of others. Now, this could be fear, humiliation, frustration. It could be anger even, and there can be different reasons for this. It can be just to cause contention and mayhem. It could be to spread misinformation, to intimidate, to antagonize. Sometimes they just want to shut something or someone down, something they don't agree with. And do you know what? Some just engage in some kind of a pointless game for their own entertainment. But what kind of a person engages in internet trolling? Well, research from Brigham Young University have found that many people with dark personality traits and Schadenfreude are more likely to demonstrate trolling behaviours. Now, the Dark Triad is a combination of psychopathy, narcissism and machiavellianism. Schadenfreude, that's a German word, and that means someone who derives pleasure from other people's misfortune and discomfort. In other words, sadism. Now, other areas of research have shown that whenever those four elements, the psychopathy, the narcissism, the machiavellianism and the sadism, when they come together, you have what's known as the Dark Tetrad. And these would be what's known as subclinical. In other words, there may be very strong traits in one or more of the areas, maybe less so in the others. Strong traits maybe, but not enough for a clinical diagnosis for a personality disorder. So let's look at the different elements of the Dark Tetrad to see if they fit the character of the online troll. And I'm also going to look at the different areas of research afterwards to see how they come together. So first of all, there is psychopathy. Now, this could be characterized by being callous and having a lack of remorse for harming others. Psychopathy comes under the umbrella term of antisocial personality, which is often characterized by hostility and aggression. Sometimes there's unnecessary risk-taking and having no regard for the well-being or for the safety of others. So what might that look like in trolling? Well, you might have someone who's claiming to be very virtuous or as part of some kind of righteous movement, but their behavior is really just self-serving. Any gratification they get is gained through socially negative attitudes and behaviors. I think the psychopathy would explain some of the more extreme types, where we see threats of violence and sexual violence and even encouraging others to engage in that level of hatred. I think it's also present in those that we see spreading hate speech or trying to shut something down that they claim is hate speech. Now, the sadistic elements at play there, such as the threats, the capitalizing on other people's fears and pain and misfortune, I would suggest that's not so much pleasure, although yes, they may well be getting pleasure from it, but it's more as a means to an end. They terrorize, threaten in order to dominate, to control, and to force others to comply. The second component would be narcissism. Now, narcissism is primarily ego-driven and is often characterized by a sense of entitlement. There's haughty behavior, there's being highly disagreeable and either highly resistant or highly sensitive to criticism. There is also a lack of empathy. Now, it's a lack of empathy, not no empathy. There is what's known as a cognitive empathy. This is sometimes known as a dark empathy. Now, in other words, they know what they're doing. They know what buttons to push. They know what reaction that they want, and they know pretty much how to go about getting that reaction. They enjoy those reactions, they're feeding off it. And there are different kinds of narcissism. I think with the grandiose narcissism, we see the troll who can get very angry. Now, they're often an expert on topics and subjects that they know nothing about. They can be very quick to try to discredit the other person's credentials, and if they can't do that, they'll pretty much try to discredit the person themselves. Putting things out there on the internet in order to maybe draw in some sympathy, support, and attention from others. Regardless of the presentation, remember when it comes to narcissism, again, primarily ego-driven, so everything is about them. They maybe see something online that challenges them or challenges their worldview somehow, and they may react as if it's about them personally. Sometimes that can bring up what's often known as narcissistic rage. Another common characteristic of narcissism is envy. They believe people should be envious of them, and they are generally very envious of other people. They don't like to see others happy, successful, even just being popular, and they tend to try to ruin it somehow. They often engage in conversations online and frustrate the hell out of the people they're trolling, as their arguments are nonsensical, circular reasoning, and often personalized against the other person. Thirdly, there is sadism. Now, this is often characterized by receiving gratification from the pain, humiliation, and the misery of others, using cruelty for their own pleasure, their own entertainment, or to control and to dominate. There are different kinds of sadism. There's what's known as explosive sadism, which is often the unrestrained anger and the vitriol. Now, these trolls are scathing, merciless, they relish menacing and dehumanizing others. There is tyrannical sadism, which is controlling others through outbursts of fury, humiliation, and fearsome attacks. Then there's enforcing sadism. They threaten, humiliate, destroy others in the name of the greater good. They believe themselves to be on their right side. It is their role in life to seek out the less virtuous, the less moral, and to punish them. And then there's spineless sadism. Now, these would be more cowardly, but can be every bit as venomous as the others now, just in different ways. For example, they can feel safe to harass and to bully through just being anonymous, or perhaps being part of a larger group or a larger movement. They might not necessarily be the first to insult someone or to threaten someone, but are very quick to take part in pile-ons and to try to keep it going. They can also switch sides very quickly whenever it suits them. I think with spineless sadism as well, what we often see is the more passive-aggressive type of troll. For example, the jokes with Jags, the pretending to just be a playful scamp, or highlighting errors or fault just for the sake of a debate. But they're really quite bogus and insecure, and any targets they pick on themselves, they tend to be quite isolated or vulnerable somehow. And lastly, there's machiavellianism. Now, this is the very manipulative element of the Dark Tetrad. They might be spreading or withholding information in order to manipulate others, manipulate the population, the news, elections even. They may be commenting and posting things to elicit a specific reaction. They're always kind of scheming, plotting, looking for something just to exploit in order to further their own agenda. They're the type that would just put something out there just to see if anybody bites, if anybody reacts. When it comes to the manipulation side of things, remember the internet has been around for a while now, and many trolls have had a long time to finely tune their skills, to find out in which forum is it reasonable to do this and is it best to do that, and even with different kinds of people, to know what works and what doesn't. For example, the very aggressive, vitriolic kind of troll, they generally don't bother to go onto forums where there is civil discussion and the discussions are well moderated and people are generally pleasant and friendly. If you remember earlier on, I mentioned a cognitive empathy. That kind of empathy can be quite analytical, so some can adapt how they go about their trolling, learning what buttons to push, what kind of language to use. At this point, I would like to add that other research I had looked at from the Ottoman Gakuin University in Japan suggested that there is a link, when it comes to trolling anyway, there is a link between loneliness and aggression. Now, loneliness can represent a state of chronic frustration. There's maybe unmet needs and a lack of connection with others. So if you think about that loneliness, that inner turmoil, the bitterness, the envy and the resentment, you imagine that co-occurring with dark personality traits. That's often quite a destructive combination. And with loneliness, bad attention still brings an emotional reward. It is better than no attention at all. That emotional reward can become quite addictive. The more they inflict misery on others, the more they do. And the more they do, the better they feel. So the more they inflict misery on others. Which does sound quite maladaptive, because if someone is lonely, if they want some kind of connection, antagonizing others is probably not the best way to go about it. But then, as Milton once wrote, to some people, maybe it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. So that's a brief outline of the personality type of the internet troll. Now, as always, there are things I've missed. By all means, please feel free to use the comment box below. There are some interesting conversations started around these videos. But if you find this video interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel. And until next time, thanks for watching. Here's a guy here who says he is a troll and how much he enjoys it and all that sort of thing. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but it's the bit at the end. He says, I have a whole bit about people that wear thick black frame glasses offering advice, but that's for another time. You cheeky little wind-up scamster, you. This is one of the videos I made on narcissism. The guy asks, hey Darren, is the narcissist in the room? I think he's talking to you, you know.